I think you're what is it, chomping at the bits to talk about the Algeria connection, right?
Well, it explains so much, and
Yeah.
we've kind of given away the hint, but still, everybody should watch this video. Look at it.
Right.
We're not going to tell you what it is.
Yeah.
Look at it and try to figure out what it is you're looking at.
Okay,
And then there's a reveal at the end. By the way, that's Jackie Kennedy with little John John. Okay, so just pause it for a second. Yeah, there you go. Pause for 1 second. So everybody should try to guess, what was that? All right, and here's the reveal.
This moment of national independence for the people of Algeria, the creation of a great new state, represents the devoted and courageous work of the Algerian people and their leaders, stretching over many years. I congratulate them. I congratulate them as President of the United States, and I congratulate them on behalf of the American people. We too fought for our own independence also, and it cost us many years of bloodshed and tears and work and perseverance. But we finally obtained our independence as you have yours, and we have maintained it as you will yours. It's a particular source of satisfaction to me to express these words of greeting to our friends in Algeria, because I recall speaking some years ago in the Senate of the United States on behalf of independence for Algeria.
So folks, what you saw, I mean, I want to ask this question. Has anybody ever seen such a lavish reception for anybody at the White House ever?
Yeah, it's true, yeah.
Okay. So what was that, folks? That was October 15th, 1962. That was Ahmed Ben Bella. That was the newly elected president of independent Algeria, the first Algerian to be the head of Algeria since the French invaded it in 1830. Okay, so they invaded in 1830, and I want to repeat, they killed 1/3 of all of Algeria in their first wave of invasion. Now, young John F. Kennedy, when he was a senator from Massachusetts, made this, there was a second war of independence that took place from between 54 and 62, in which 400,000 to 1.5 million Algerians were killed, civilians. And they, they did the typical stuff, bombing villages, burning villages, rounding people up, putting them in the equivalent of concentration camps, destroying their agricultural resources. And it was a drain the swamp military operation. The idea of, hey, we got all these freedom fighters in Algeria that are causing this trouble. Why don't we just destroy the entire civil infrastructure so they can never trouble us again? And by the way, Israel participated in that. They provided intelligence assets, because they knew a lot about the Middle East. They also trained French Jewish fighters and armed them and so on. So Israel was involved in that battle. So young John F. Kennedy, senator from Massachusetts, gave a long speech to the Senate saying, this is wrong. We think France should stop. We don't think the United States should support this. This helps nobody. Okay. So I have to say something about Noam Chomsky. And I know this is going to seem like I love him. There'd be no me without him. I mean, he was the guy that was explaining all this stuff in the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, before the rest of us figured it out. But I feel he made one terrible error, which was to lump JFK with the rest of the elites. And yeah, on a certain level, that's true. But there's two things different about JFK. He was the only guy in the White House, possibly in history, including Abraham Lincoln and George Washington, who had no financial stake in any direction the United States went in. Okay. George Washington owned a lot of land. Abraham Lincoln was actually an attorney for the railroad companies. That's how he made his money. Nobody ever asked how Abraham Lincoln has made his money, right? Kennedy was the only guy whose father was one of the richest men in the world. And, you know, Joseph Kennedy was he had a vast Democratic Party network. He was the 5th richest man in the United States. He also knew all about myth making in Hollywood because he was one of the most important financiers in Hollywood. He put John F. Kennedy in position. We would not have seen the Kennedy brothers had it not been for Joseph Kennedy. Not that they weren't talented and ambitious. He paved the way. Okay. And those two men were absolutely independent. They looked at the world through the lens of what is right. What is right for America first, which is what they should do because they're Americans. But they also looked at what is right for the entire world. And Kennedy came to the conclusion was all this coup making and assassination and imperialism and putting our necks, putting our heels on the necks of the poor is wrong. And he had this opinion as a young man. There was no political gain for him as a senator from Massachusetts to give a long talk. In fact, it hurt him, right? Because France was our ally. It was the Cold War and everything. He didn't care. He saw what was right and he spoke up for it. So when France finally, de Gaulle finally said, we're out, Algeria had a chance to elect a president, and look at what Kennedy did. That is the greatest honor. It was the color guard, and not just 3 guys with a flag, 20 guys from each of the armed forces, all so the generals saluting and everything. And that was a message to the world, but it was also a message to the U.S. military, you know, because Kennedy was a military man and he was very astute. And when you're president, you have to let the troops know what the direction is. So in addition to honoring this man, honoring Algeria, telegraphing to the world that we're out of the coup business, we're out of this, you know. He was also telegraphing to the military, we're not fighting Arab-speaking people. And by the way, you got to say Arab-speaking. When people say Arab, it's ridiculous. It's like saying African, you know. Like these countries are different. They're different people.
Arabic speaking, right? Arabic speaking.
Arabic speaking. Excuse me. Arabic speaking people. We are not their enemies. We don't want to be their enemies. We want to be their friends. And we want to be the friend of the impulse to liberty all over the world. We're going to compete. And he said this in various speeches. We're going to compete, and we're going to compete hard, but we're going to compete fair. And Chomsky would say, well, he's a Cold Warrior. And it's true. He was a Cold Warrior. But his way of fighting the Cold War was to, let's be better than the Soviets. Let's show a better way. Let's show the best of us. So I'm afraid a lot of the left has written off Kennedy as an unimportant person. But when you see this, and this is just a narrow slice of what he did the same thing in Indochina. He gave, or
not unimportant. I wouldn't say unimportant, but not a departure from regular presidential foreign policy.
Gotcha.
Right.
But in fact,
because they would say he's important, they just basically don't want to get. They would say he doesn't deserve credit for ABC. I mean,
well, I've heard Chomsky say, and you know, everybody's entitled to their opinion. He's not particularly interested in who killed Kennedy or why, because he's just one of the bunch. But it's not quite accurate. Again, we've just seen this demonstration of Kennedy putting his money where his mouth is, and again, no personal gain for him. There's no Algerian lobbying group that would funnel money into his campaign. He did this to do the right thing. All right. And a year later, he was dead. Okay. So during the summer of 1963, he and his brother, who's the attorney general, were fighting Israel on 2 fronts. One, Kennedy personally, JFK personally, he wrote the letters, or they were signed with his name. He wrote the letters, the telegrams, the cables, and we have all the correspondence, which was classified until just a few years ago, which is really weird. He was telling the Israelis, you cannot have a nuclear weapon, period. End of story. We need to see your labs. We need to see what you're doing. Now, on the brother side, Robert Kennedy, who was attorney general, was telling the Israeli lobbyist groups, you got to register just like everybody else. England registers, Canada registers, Australia registers. You've got to register too. And of course, they were using the endless delay tactics. So there was a secret war, and I call it secret. I call it a battle. It was secret because nobody knew about it at the time, and nobody knew about it as recently as the dawn of the 21st century. All right, so it was secret. I'm calling it a battle because it wasn't an all-out war, but it was a battle. It was serious, and each side had a position, and each side was digging in deep. And who was he fighting against? He was fighting against, in my opinion, extremist elements in Israel, which, by the way, I don't know how many people know this. Did you know that Hannah Arendt, and am I pronouncing that right? Sometimes I read things that I don't know how to pronounce. The great sociologist
Arendt, yeah,
Arendt, who spoke against fascism. She and Einstein wrote a letter to the New York Times in the 1940s saying, "Hey, these Zionist extremists are terrible. You shouldn't. We shouldn't."
They even said fascists. Yeah.
Yeah, we shouldn't. We should not invite them into our country to speak.
Right.
Now that's something I would bang that drum every day of the week.
Yeah.